Here's the agenda of today's webinar. First, we'll discuss Microsoft Fabric and its components. Then I'll explain then how Microsoft Fabric is different from the existing tools. And with that, we'll move to the hands-on practice exercise with Microsoft Fabric. And last but not least, we'll have a Q&A session and I'll be sharing the resources as well. So let's get started. So you all might be wondering that what is Microsoft Fabric? Well, if you see that in today's world, managing vast amounts of organizational data and driving meaningful insights from them is no small feat. It's quite a challenging task. Setting up different tools and resources for tasks like data ingestion, engineering, and analytics often takes a lot of time and effort. And this is exactly where Microsoft Fabric comes into picture, providing you a unified platform designed to streamline data management and analytics. With Microsoft Fabric, you can imagine a single ecosystem where you no longer need to juggle multiple tools or have multiple copies of data or worry about integration issues. So let's see what are the different components of Microsoft Fabric. So Fabric offers these specialized workloads, or you could say components, where each of them has several tools or items that allow you to perform different tasks. One important point to note here is that uh, all of these workloads, they are built on a unified data storage that is called One Lake, which ensures seamless integration and allows multiple teams to seamlessly collaborate on projects. So let's take a closer look. Yeah. So here you could see all of these different workloads, and they are you could see that they are built on this one lake. Within one lake, that is within Microsoft Fabric, you could store your data in these storage artifacts like warehouse, lakehouse, custom databases, or as data sets. So let me describe each of these workloads one by one. So first one here we have is Synapse Data Warehousing. So it's a next generation lake warehouse supporting data warehouses and SQL endpoints of lake houses. Here you can store your data and you can query it using Transact SQL. You could load your data, you could create tables, and you could perform different kind of transformations using Transact SQL. The other workload we have here is Synapse Data Engineering. So with Synapse Data Engineering is a robust Spark-based platform for performing large-scale transformations. For that, you could make use of notebooks and Spark jobs on your data that would be stored in the lakehouse. So here, do not get confused because whenever you are going to create a lakehouse in IMS Fabric, you would get two endpoints. One would be the SQL endpoint that we just discussed, and the other would be the endpoint where you could store your structured as well as unstructured data, might be in form of files. Next, we have is Data Factory. So it's a modern data integration experience that allows data ingestion and preparation of your data from over 200 data sources. Uh, and the other workload we have here is Synapse Data Science. So as the name suggests, it allows you to perform different data science related tasks and build and deploy machine learning models. It also integrates with Azure Machine Learning so that you can create experiments. With that, you can track your the training process of your models and evaluate their performance. Next is Synapse Real-Time Analytics. So it's a perfect workload or experience for event-driven scenarios or streaming data. And your real-time data that might be coming from some IoT devices. So with this workload leverages custom databases that can be queried so the data in these databases that can be queried using custom query language. And last but not least, we have yeah, we have Power BI workload. So it allows you to connect all your data within Microsoft Fabric that you have just prepared in your Microsoft Fabric. You can directly connect that data to your reports. It would enable quick insights and analytics without needing to create a copy of your data or uh, adding or going through the integration issues. So, to better understand how Microsoft Fabric stands out, consider this example workflow where you need to ingest your data, store it, and transform it, and then finally generate some business insights from your data. So in a traditional setup, you could see here you would need to use some existing tools. I have listed a few tools that are for each of these steps, right? So you could see here that each step involves a different tool. So since each team would be using different tools and storing data in different format, it would lead to data silos and require significant effort to integrate that data. Also, sharing your data across each of the tool would create multiple copies of data, and you would need to deal with separate interfaces, security policies, and workflows for each of these tools. But if you consider the same scenario with Microsoft Fabric, you can see how, by utilizing each of the workloads of Microsoft Fabric, you can perform each of these tasks. With Data Factory or Data Warehouse and Data Engineering and Data Science workloads, you could perform all of these tasks. And the good thing is that now each of these steps can be done under one umbrella of Microsoft Fabric. And since all of these workloads are seamlessly integrated within Fabric, data is stored centrally within one lake, so it won't create data silos. It would eliminate data silos and ensures a single consistent copy of your data. Also, you do not need to juggle between multiple tools. So it provides you a unified user experience where you can just once log in and perform all of these tasks within the platform of Microsoft Fabric. Also regarding security and governance, so they are simplified with a unified model that is applied across all of these workloads. So with that, now let's dive into some hands-on demonstrations to see these concepts in action. So in our exercise, we'll be utilizing bank customer journey data, and here is the workflow. Let me show you. Yeah. So here is how the workflow of our exercise looks like. As the data source, we'll be utilizing blob storage. And for preparing and transformation part, we'll be following Microsoft's recommended approach for organizing data. So this approach is called basically medallion architecture, where we'll be storing our data into we'll be storing our data into three layers. The first layer here is the bronze layer. So this is where you are going to store the raw data. And then in the silver layer, we have our cleansed data. Once we perform some transformations, we clean our data, where we store it into the silver layer. And for the last layer, after performing grouping of your data and aggregation, once you have your process data set, you could store it into the gold layer. And from that, you could use it to perform any analysis or any data science task. So to implement this, we'll be using three separate lake houses. The first one to store our data, our raw data, the second one to store our cleansed data, and the third one to store our processed data that is ready for analytics. So let me explain you this flow. First, we are gonna copy our data from blob storage into the first lake house. And then we'll use data flow to perform some basic transformations. And then we're gonna store that data into the second lake house. And then using Notebook, we'll perform some more transformations. We'll process our data and store it into the gold lake house. So this is where your data can be accessed to be used for any of the purposes, for creating ML model or for creating Power BI reports or any other tasks. So with that, uh, so this it's time for live demonstration of our hands-on exercise. Let me switch over to Microsoft Fabric. So I hope my screen is visible. Yeah. So let's start the hands-on exercise. But before that, let me give you an overview of this MS Fabric interface. So here on your screen, you could see all of these experiences that are available in Microsoft Fabric. Uh, so if I want to switch to any of these experiences, I can click on them. Let's say data science. So when you click on this data science experience, you will see that it would show you the study material related to data science. And also, it would recommend you some items related to data science. So you can perform any data science task using these items. So if you are new to MS Fabric, this feature is great for you, right? And if you want to switch to another experience, you can just go to this bottom left corner icon. You could click it and switch to another experience. Let's say data warehouse. So it's gonna show you the items related to data warehouse, and also the study material or the reading material related to the data warehouse. So yeah. So now that uh, we have okay, so after this overview, we can get started with our hands-on exercise. So to perform any task on MS Fabric, you first need to create a workspace, right? So if you go to this workspaces option, you could see here a list of workspaces that you already have in your MS Fabric. Like I have this all of these workspaces here. So I can just create a new workspace if you do not have any, uh, and give it an appropriate name. You could also write a description for future reference. And once you apply it, it will create a workspace for you. So this is how uh, you will see your workspace. And with this new item, you could add new items in your workspace. But as I already have created a workspace, so I'm just gonna select my workspace. Now, as I discussed, for the hands-on experience, I said that I would be creating three different lake houses, right? So the first lake house that I would be creating, I am gonna call it raw lake house because it's gonna be storing the raw data just immediately after the ingestion. And then I'm gonna create a new lake house. And I'm gonna name it as Glance Lake House. So this will serve as the silver layer for me, because I'll be storing my client's data here. And in the curated lake house, I will be storing my process data that is ready for analytics. So I've already created the lake houses, but I'm gonna show you that how you can create one. So you could go to this new item and you could search lake house. And by going to lake house, you can name it, let's say raw lake house. Uh, Okay, so you do not need to enable this option if you're gonna enable this option. So we use this option actually to allow us to manage and create custom schemas. I'm not gonna enable it for now. Just you can create it. Right. So this is how your new lake house would look like. And as I already have the clans and curated lake house, I'm not gonna create one, but you would need to create all of these three lake houses. Okay. So for the second step, we are gonna create a pipeline to orchestrate all the steps of data ingestion, data loading, and data transformation. So we could go to new item, search pipeline, and select a data pipeline. So you could name it as right, and this will create a new pipeline for us. Right. Yeah. So we'll go to activities tab to add activities into our pipeline. So what activities do we need? As we know that first we need to copy our data from the blob storage into the raw lake house, right? So I'm going to use the copy data activity for that purpose. You can name your copy activity as you want. You can also add descriptions for a future reference. Then to add the source, we'll go to source tab and this connection field would appear. Okay. So from this drop down, you could see a list of connections that you have already created in your MS Fabric. But I'm going to create a new connection that would be to blob storage, right? So going to more, you would see this kind of tab. So in this data source window, you could see a list of data sources that are available in Microsoft Fabric. Here you could simply search blob and yeah. So going to Azure Blob Storage, it would ask you some credentials or some connection settings. So first you need to give your account name or the URL to your storage account. So I'm gonna give my account name. Yeah. And I have already these connections for my blob storage, but I'm not gonna create a new one, create new connection. You could name it as you want. And for the authentication kind, you could select anyone that's appropriate for you. I'm gonna select the account key. For that, I would need my account key. So I'll just copy it and paste it here and connect. So that it would take a few seconds to connect you to the source. Yeah. So now you could see it's asking you some uh, more information about your data source, like the file path. So I'm gonna, you can just browse it here, right? So within my demo container in my blob storage, I have this file that I want to use as the data source. It is bank customerjourn.csv. So I'm gonna load that file. It's a CSV file. So I'm gonna select the format here as a delimited text. Now for the destination. So now our data source is configured. Let's go to the destination tab and add a connection for the destination. So what we want to do is that we want to ingest our data and store it into the raw lake house. So for that, let's again do this process. Let's go to more, and okay, so if you go to this one lake data hub, it would show you a list of all these storage artifacts that you have created in your workspace. So yeah, I have this lake house in my demo webinar workspace. I'm going to select this one, and it asks you to select the folder. I want to store my data as a table, so I'm going to select table. And if you already have a table, you could just from the drop down you could select it, or if you do not have anything in your database and you want to create a new table, so you're going to go to this new option and type a name for your table. Yeah, and with this advanced option you could select the table action as append or as override. For now I'm selecting this it as override, but if you want to append your data every time the pipeline would run, so you could select append. And then going to mappings option, you could import the schema. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna detect the schema from my CSV file, and uh, it would map that schema for me. You could see that. So now in order to copy our data into the raw lake house, let's just run the pipeline, save and run it. So meanwhile our pipeline is running. So what would be the next activity that we would be requiring for performing transformations? So it's gonna be data flow. Using data flow, we'll perform some basic transformations, and then we are gonna store that data into our next lakehouse, that is Glance Lakehouse. So it takes a few seconds to run the pipeline. Yeah, so our pipeline succeeded. So let's add another activity, that is data flow. You could name it as you want. Then going to settings. So from here, you could select a workspace, right? In our case, the workspace name is demo webinar. And for the data flow, you could select the data flow. If you already have created a data flow, then you can select it from this drop down. But we are going to create a new one. So let's select new. So it's going to open this data flow, right? So if you see closely, you would notice that this interface is quite similar to the one you use in your Power Query in Power BI, right? So first we want to add a source to this flow. So for that, we are gonna go to this get data option, more, and then going to one lake data hub, we can select the Glance Lake House. So this is our Glance Lake House that we created in our workspace. Let's Okay, so for the data source, we want to select raw lake house, not the Glance lake house, because this is going to be our source, and then we are going to store our transform data into the raw lake house. So it's going to take a while. Right. So we can just go back and change our source to raw lake house. This is the raw lake house that we created. So it's going to connect to the raw lake house. All right, so you're gonna refresh it. So what happens is that once you load your data, you need to sometimes you need to refresh it. Okay, so I'm just gonna go and quickly refresh my data in the lake house. So let's see. In our raw lake house, there should be a customer journey table there. So yeah, now we can see it. So let's go to our workspace and reopen our data flow that we just created. So whenever you're gonna run your pipeline, you should always check that if your data is loaded or not. So go to get data, more, and raw lakehouse. Okay, now I can see my table here. Sometimes it just takes a few seconds or a minute to reflect the changes, right? So we are just gonna create. So this way it's gonna load our customer churn table into the data flow, right? So now it's time for transformations. Let's go to transform tab. Uh, yeah. So first I'm seeing that there are some data types uh, that I want to change, like this credit source, the age column, the tenure, has card, and is member. They are all in text form right now, and I want to change them to the whole number. So for that, we can go to this data type option and select whole number. And also for this balance and estimated salary, I'm seeing that they are also in text format, so I want to change them to decimal. For that, you can also select this detect data type option. So it's gonna detect the data type and change it accordingly. Right. Okay, now yeah. For my is deleted column, I only want to show all those records that are active. So for that, I'm gonna filter out all those records where is this is deleted column is one. So that way I'm just gonna be working on the data that is there. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to add a destination. After all performing all of these transformations, we want to save our data into the clans lakehouse. For that, let's select this clan lakehouse option. Go to next, and you need to select your workspace. So our workspace is demo webinar, and within that, I want to select clans lakehouse as my destination. So let's go to next option. It's going to show you a preview of the column mappings. You could review it. So it's correct for me. I'm going to save these settings. Okay, now Once you are done with the transformations, you could just publish this data flow so that you would get your data saved at the destination that in our case is the Glance Lake House. So you could see this data flow, it's currently running. So meanwhile it's running, we can go back to our pipeline and add the next activity, which in our case it's notebook. So once our data is saved into the Glance Lake House, we'll be utilizing a notebook to perform some more transformations, right? And store our data into a curated lake house. So first I want to copy the data and then I want to perform the data flow task. So I'm just gonna connect it on success. I'm gonna connect it to notebook, right? So for the notebook, the process is quite similar. You could name it as you want and going to the settings. You have to select the workspace that you are working on and you need to select the notebook. Okay, so if you already have a notebook, so you could just select it. Like in my case, I have already created a notebook for saving some time. So you're gonna select that. If you do not have a notebook, you could click on this new button and create a new notebook the way we created our data flow, right? So I'm gonna open my notebook. So now it's loading. Uh, Meanwhile, we can go back to our workspace and see if the data flow is completed. Yeah, so now the data flow is published. So we can check if our data is stored in the Glance Lake House or not. Can go here and load it. Yeah, so now you could see that we have our customer churn table here. You could also preview your table by clicking on it. It's gonna show you first 1,000 rows of your table, right? So now we can go back to our notebook. Okay, so in your case, I will provide you the notebook, which you can just import, like from this import option. Going to notebook, you could just import your notebook once you have downloaded it. You could import your notebook from your computer, right? So I'm going to open my notebook that I have already imported. So as a source data, we will be using our Glance Lake House because this is where we just stored our data by performing some transformations using data flow, right? So I'm gonna go to this add source option, select Lake House, and as I already have a lake house, so I'm gonna select this existing option and click add. And from here, you need to select the Glance Lake House. So this is my Glance Lake House and click on add, right? So initially, first we are importing the required libraries. Let's run this and then we'll be loading our data into our notebook from the Glance Lake House. So here you see we do not have to mention the name of the lake house since I have already connected it as a source. So I have only mentioned the table name here. So once you're gonna run this cell and create the data frame, you would see that this data wrangler option would get enabled. So the cell is still running. Meanwhile, we can scroll down. Yeah. So now our customer churn table is loaded and I have loaded it as a pandas data frame. So once it's loaded as a data frame, you could see that this data wrangler option would get enabled So if you click it, you would see that it would detect your data frame automatically. So this is one of the option in notebooks within Microsoft Fabric, where you could transform your data using this data wrangler. Okay, so by default it just chooses the first 5,000 rows. I'm gonna exceed this limit so that my whole data would get transformed, right? So I'm gonna select this data frame that I've just created in my notebook, and I'm gonna open this data wrangler. So now you could see that it would show you a summary of your data, and in the middle, you could see the summary of your data column wise, and on the left, you could see it shows you some operations that you could perform on your data. So for my data, I'm seeing that this tenure and balance columns, they have some missing data, right? So I'm going to select these two columns, and for my missing values, let's say I want to fill the missing values, right, with a 0. So I can just apply this step, right? And I also want to remove all the rows that are duplicates. So I can go to this option, drop duplicate row, and from it would give you an option that to select the columns that you want to. Okay, so on the basis of row number and the customer ID, I want to drop the duplicates wherever these values are same, same, right? So I'm gonna apply this operation. You could say there are a number of options like formulas. You have this one hot encoding option that would be really useful for you when you're performing uh, data engineering, feature engineering related to your ML task, or you need to perform any other even basic tasks. You could use this data wrangler. It's an amazing no code transformation option for you. Okay, so we can just also you could download your CSV after transforming. So I'm just gonna go back, and it gives you an option to add the code to your notebook. With that, you can add this code into your notebook, right? And use the transform data. So as I already have this code, so I'm just gonna remove this one, right? Then we are gonna run this cell, and I'm gonna save my data into the curated lakehouse. I'm saving my data with this name, df clean, into my curated lakehouse. So now we have performed all the transformations and saved our data into the curated lakehouse. Uh, so the cell is running, yeah. So now our curated lakehouse would have the data that is now ready to perform any kind of analytics or ML task. So we are going to perform two tasks. For the first task that we are going to perform on our curated data is the data science related task. We are going to train an ML model uh, using the our curated data, and then we'll be using that same data to create a Power BI report. So these are just the basic steps that you need to perform for training your ML model. We are dropping some unnecessary columns like customer ID and row number. Then we are encoding some of our columns like gender and geography. So this is now your data would look like. Okay, and then we are using ML flow. We are setting an experiment. Uh, so we have created this experiment with name customer experiment to track the training process of our models. Then we are preparing our data set, splitting it into the training and test sets. And then we are going to use the random forest classifier as our first model, right? And the second model is also the random forest classifier, but with some different hyperparameters. And after that, we are going to save our models. So since we have defined the experiment, so it's going to save your models and the training process as well. So if you go to your workspace, after running this, if you go to your workspace, you could see the experiment would be created. So this is our customer experiment. And within that experiment, you will be able to see all your models that you have just created. So we have this model. This was our first model and our second model. You could also compare your models like this. You could select, and this way it would give you this option to compare your model's performance. You could also customize the view, like if I want to check the precision score. You could also customize the columns like this. All right, so we are done with our first task. Now our second task was to create a Power BI report using that same data. So we're gonna go to our workspace and our curated lakehouse. Here you could see that this df clean table is created. So this is our uh, so this is the curated data set that we have just created and used for training our ML model. So to create a Power BI report, you could just go to this new semantic model option. It would create a new Power BI semantic model for you. You could give it an appropriate name. And from here, you could select the table that you want to add in your model. We just have this one table. We're going to select this and confirm. So this way, it's going to create a semantic model for you. It's going to take a few seconds. So once our semantic model would be ready, we could use it to create a report manually, or we could also use that semantic model to create a report. So this is how our semantic model looks like. Here you could create a new report, or you could also create new measures in your data. So let's go to our workspace, navigate to our semantic model that we just created. So our semantic model, uh, okay, let me just refresh it. Yeah, so here is our semantic model. You could click on these three dots and it gives you a number of options. So with this option, you could create a report manually, but for saving time, I'm just gonna create a report. So what it's gonna do is gonna read our data, perform some analysis, and would generate our report for us. So let's save the report and save. So now you could see it has created a report for us, a quite detailed report, right? So now we could just navigate back to our pipeline and conclude our hands on exercise. So if you always want updated data in your fabric uh, for performing your tasks, you could go to this run option. You could schedule it. Okay. And let's say I want to, you can add the time, at what time of the day you want your pipeline to get refreshed. So let's say 12:50, and so you can select time. Let's say December 2024, and you could also add the end time, right? And just click on apply. So this way, daily your pipeline uh, would get updated. Uh, it means your pipeline is gonna run daily at 12:50, right? So this way you can always have updated data in your fabric. So this is the ending point of our hands-on exercise. With this exercise, you could say that it illustrates how MS Fabric is an all-in-one analytics platform for data ingestion and creating business insights. Just by using the same data within MS Fabric, with using the same data, you could perform different tasks. Like we perform a data science task and a Power BI task as well. Now, this is not the end for Microsoft Fabric. Uh, you could uh, you could explore various features that are there in MS Fabric. You could also enhance your understanding and dive deeper into it by you could also refer to Microsoft Learn to get more understanding of Microsoft Fabric. You could also explore the certifications related to it. So I think now it's time for the Q&A session. So if you guys have any confusion or any question, you could just drop it into the chat box and I'll be answering all your queries.
Hello, Imsha. So we have questions in the Q&A chat. If you can just refer to that. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so yeah, you would get the recording of this webinar. And regarding this question, okay, so you're saying that it's not practical to put all your data in one location. For example, the company is global and data cannot move. Different sources, too expensive to move. Right, so we are using MS Fabric here because we want to, okay, so because we want uh, um, uh, to avoid that hustle that we have while using different tools because we get multiple copies of our data and our data gets stored into multiple formats. We want to avoid that situation here. That's why we are using MS Fabric. I hope this answers your query. Obviously, it's not always that you have to use MS Fabric, but if you have issues like this, you can switch to MS Fabric. So yeah, so I will be providing a GitHub where you would get access to the notebook and the slide deck as well. Okay, so is this tool better for data scientists or data engineers? So uh, the benefit of using this tool is that as I mentioned, that different teams can collaborate seamlessly. So this tool can be utilized by data engineers and data scientists as well. They both can use the same tool to perform data transformations. Data engineers can use this tool, and then using that transformed data, the data scientists can perform their data science related tasks. So I think the questions are answered. So
Yeah,
how?
Jamsha, we do have
Yeah.
another question. When you created a PySpark session in your notebook, where does Spark run? That is from ZSO. If you can just check the chart, there are a couple of questions there as well.
Okay. So what's the difference between this and Azure Synapse? Yeah, so with Microsoft Fabric, you are performing all your tasks like data ingestion, data transformation. You are performing all your tasks within one platform. But when you were using other tools, you were just using those tools for a specific task, like for data engineering or analytics. You are saying that you're utilizing Azure Synapse, right? So with Microsoft Fabric, you do not need to use different tools. That's the benefit of using Microsoft Fabric. So your Spark notebooks, they run within Microsoft Fabric, and all your data it gets stored within the one lake of your Microsoft Fabric.